Good evening. I'm Mary Floyd Wilson, Chair of the Department of English and Comparative Literature. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 2021 Frank B. Haynes Writer-in-Residence event. I first wish to express the department's profound gratitude to Nancy Haynes White and Robin Haynes for their generous support of the Writer-in-Residence program. We are so indebted to the Haynes family for making this program possible and for supporting creative writing at Carolina in so many ways. Nancy and Robin's father, Frank Porter Haynes Sr., the class of 1942, demonstrated throughout his life the great regard he had for literature and the arts, and his family's support has been so crucial to the success of our department's creative writing programming, and especially beneficial to our wonderfully talented creative writing students. Please know that the Department of English and Comparative Literature is deeply committed to bringing you programs just like this one, and we depend on donors to achieve this goal. So please do consider making a gift to support such literary events. We're also really pleased to remind you that this event is part of a countdown to our celebration this fall of 225 years of literary study here at Carolina. Please put October 28th through the 30th on your calendar. On those dates, we are planning an exciting schedule of speakers, musical performances, film, panel discussions, and conversations. We will be welcoming alumni and colleagues and all of you, our friends, to participate. It will be an occasion for honoring our rich past and looking forward to an innovative and exciting future for the Department of English and Comparative Literature. So please visit our 225 website for details, and we're going to post the link to this website in our chat for you to go to. So now to our program for tonight. So first I want to acknowledge that we are disappointed that the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II is unable to join us this evening due to a disruption in his travel schedule. But I also want to express our joyful thanks that we are welcoming North Carolina Poet Laureate Jaki Shelton Green. Her presence brings with it our good weather and sunshine. I would be hard pressed to think of a more inspirational guest than Miss Green, where she pours her creativity and passion into advocacy for the arts and for social justice. I think I speak for all of my colleagues when I say that we in the Department of English and Comparative Literature constantly strive to educate our students on how to promote justice, fight injustices, build relationships, and foster progressive communities. We recognize and celebrate the power of Green's poetry to do this most important work. To have this wonderful opportunity today for us and our students to listen to and learn from the experiences and wisdom of such a dedicated and stirring activist artist as Jaki Shelton Green, we feel truly blessed. It is a momentous occasion indeed. Before we get started, I would like to recognize some key members of our administration who have provided such kind and enthusiastic support for our programming and our mission. Senior Associate Dean for Fine Arts and Humanities, Elizabeth Englehart, Dean of the College, Terry Rhodes, our Provost, Bob Lewin, and our Chancellor, Kevin Guskowitz. We thank you all for being here and for supporting us. It is now my pleasure to introduce our very own Professor Daniel Wallace, who will introduce our guest. Daniel, as you all know, is an award-winning novelist, a wonderful teacher, and an absolutely delightful colleague. When the sky is gray and your coffee is cold and you need a vacation, Daniel can somehow still make you smile. So here's one of my favorite humans, Daniel Wallace.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. That's amazing. That made my evening. But this is going to make it even better. It's such an honor and a pleasure to have this opportunity to introduce my friend Jaki Shelton Green. For the program this evening, we are, as Mary said, indebted to have Nancy Haynes White and Robin Haynes. Their support, sponsorship, and enduring belief in the creative writing program, our goals and aspirations has been without equal, and we are forever grateful. Tonight is also a gift to us from somebody who is no longer with us, Randall Keenan, who died what feels like an impossible 6 months ago. We invite a writer to campus every year, and every year there is the question, who should it be? And every year, Randall somehow always knew. That's why Jaki is here. It's in this spirit and in his that we're establishing the Randall Keenan Memorial Fund to continue this vital series at UNC. There's a link to the fund in the chat if you'd like to be a part of supporting it as well. Jaki Shelton Green is the North Carolina Poet Laureate, the first African-American and third woman to be appointed as such. She understands that job to be one, in her words, of agitator, historian, and social activist. It's a job that she takes seriously and seems to suit her. She's ready for it. She writes of the present with history in mind. It's important to look at history as a blueprint for where we go next, she says. The past is still speaking, and it's speaking loud. Green, given a notebook at a young age so she would stay quiet in the church, has built a life and career from those pages. Those pages have turned into 8 collections of poetry, including Dead on Arrival, Masks, Conjure Blues, and Feeding the Light, and work published in dozens of national and international anthologies. She has taught, and her work has been taught all over the country and the world. Her list of awards and honors is prodigious. In 2003, Jaki received the North Carolina Award for Literature, the highest honor the state can bestow. She is the 2007 recipient of the Samuel Talmadge Reagan Award for her contributions to the fine arts of North Carolina. In 2009, she was chosen to be the inaugural North Carolina Piedmont Laureate. Jaki presently teaches documentary poetry at the Duke University Center for Documentary Studies, which considers voiced and printed poetry as a storytelling method. There may be no one better suited for this position than Jaki Shelton Green. Her poems seem to speak themselves off the page, to tell all the stories we want to hear and all the stories we need to hear. After Jaki's reading, I'll invite Jean Nichol to touch on aspects of her work that deal with activism. Distinguished professor at UNC, an author of Indecent Assembly, the North Carolina Legislature's Blueprint for War Against Democracy and Inequality, and The Faces of Poverty in North Carolina, Jean is uniquely qualified to pursue this line of inquiry. After that, we'll take questions from you, which you can post in the Q&A box as they occur to you. When Jaki was inducted into the North Carolina Literary Hall of Fame in 2014, they wrote, "Green's poems issue from a persona that unflinchingly peers into the heart of darkness and foreboding and forges from it in an inimitable idiom of folk, plain speak and soul, and a brilliant patois all her own, a relentless belief that love and ancestry always prevail over heartache, that story is more important than recrimination, that language is a sacrament." Ladies and gentlemen, Jaki Shelton Green.
Good evening. I am truly honored to be the 2021 Frank Haynes Writer in Residence. I'm missing Reverend William Barber this evening. I'm grateful to the generosity of the Haynes family and very indebted to my friends at the Department of English at UNC and Comparative Literature, the Creative Writing Program, and really to my friend Randall Keenan I'm remembering that when Randall reached out to me to discuss the possibilities of my being the Frank B. Haynes Writer in Residence, I remember his enthusiasm and how proud and supportive he was, how much he wanted my voice in this space. I'd like to dedicate this reading tonight in memory of our dear Randall. I've been thinking a lot about from whence to enter in this space. And whenever I'm thinking of spoken word, meaning words that come from a well of experience and a well of history, I always think about ancestral voices. So I'm going to start with a poem that's a little harsh because it's a poem about slavery, and trigger warning, it also is a poem about lynching. An eclipse of skin. 1. The blood was the calling. 2. Ancient spirits gather beneath erect feet, cry an ancestral anointment, kiss torn torso, restitch face to smile. 3. Splintered hands hold deaf songs, one breath crawling towards light. 4. Hidden in every finger joint, hidden between shoulder and neck, hidden between heart and rib. 5. Your hair's in my drink. No, it's not, Mrs. Sarah. Mrs. Sarah, your hair's in my drink. Go ahead and move it, William. You know you don't want to drink my hair now, do you, William? 6. $20 reward. Ran away from the subscriber after asking my wife, a white Christian clean woman, for a drink of water, and then touching her apron on the 22nd December last. My nigger William, baptized by my pappy, is about 23 years. 23 years. He's a shiny black, lean built with large limbs, long fingers. He's hung like a racehorse. He has unusually small feet for a nigger, and missing the toe next to his great toe on his left foot. It has been mashed off. I will pay the above award on his delivery or proof of his hanging in any nearby county. James R. Wood, February 6, 1844. 7. Massa hung my William, had him hung from the Chinaberry tree. Same tree my William plant for Massa when William was just a child. Massa made me and my baby Liza watch from the kitchen. Liza, my child, and Massa child too. I don't cry. Liza don't cry. She more Irish than Massa. One day, Liza, remember this day. Remember what her pappy done. One day, Liza remember Mrs. Sarah sitting in the parlor with her sister Emma, drinking elderberry wine, complaining about how William blood gonna kill the grass. 8. Massa had him hung, passed out cigars and cups of peach brandy, made me suck him off in the kitchen in front of Aunt Sue, making apple fritters. 9. Aunt Sue spoke to the apples. Aunt Sue spoke to the sugar. Aunt Sue spoke to the fire. 10. The trees, the ground, the wind, remember in all the languages of storm. 11. Sky black this morning, Liza. Black like Massa blood up yonder. Black like Mr. Scalp rolling off the bed. 12. Morning sky black. 7 crows circle, gather blood from ground, paint clouds red, perch atop chinaberry tree, swallow light. I wanted to start there because as a free being and a culture that does not necessarily acknowledge me as free, it is always important for me to bring the ancestors into this space. I wanted to start there because I wanted to next flow towards my grandmother, a poem that I've written for my grandmother so many years ago, a woman who I indebt a lot of my wanting to be a writer. I never wanted to be a writer, but my grandmother gave me tiny books to write in church to be quiet, and stories of ancestors who were not allowed to read and write, not allowed to tell their stories aloud, was the bidding that she asked me to do on their behalf, to tell our stories, to be inside of the stories, to bear witness to the power of utterance. I know the grandmother one had hands. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always in bowls, folding, pinching, rolling the dough, making the bread. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always underwater, sifting rice, bluing clothes, starching lives. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always in the earth, planting seeds, removing weeds, growing knives, burying sons. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always under the cloth, pushing it along, helping it birth into skirt, dress, curtains to lock out night. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside the hair, parting, plaiting, twisting it into rainbows. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside pockets, holding the knots, counting the twisted veins, holding on to herself, lest her hands disappear into sky. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside the clouds, poking holes for the rain to fall. When I am remembering to remember when I first created this particular poem, it was during a residency with women on death row in Raleigh, Women's Correctional Center. For an entire year, I would gather with these women every Monday evening. And for an entire year, I would only allow them to write about their hands. I wanted them to really think about the majesty, the power of their hands. They were there because of their hands for an alleged or real crime they committed with their hands. And wanting them to think about how they might step into grace, not knowing where their journey was going because of their hands. For many of them, they had not touched their children in over 12 or 13 years. I would ask them to visualize closing their eyes and brushing their daughter's hair, who's now 15. The last time they'd seen that child was 3. Or women who'd lost elders while they were incarcerated, weren't able to attend their memorials. So they'd close their hands and have a conversation with the hands of those grandmothers, grandfathers, fathers, mothers. So I thought about my own grandmother's hands, and I just wanted to give the backstory of that poem. All of my poetry lives in some container of story. That's where my poems are gleaned, and that's why I'm a documentary poet. Poets do keep the muse alive. The next piece I'm going to read is a documentary poem based on some diary entries that I found years ago I did not know who these people were. I love going to antique stores and secondhand stores and looking always for old photographs and old documents and old diaries. So this could be in a lot of ways pieces of it, some of my own lineage, because I find myself inside of all of my poems. A documentary poem that comes from source found materials. Segregated Rainbows. 1. 1932, somewhere over the South Carolina border, a yellow dress becomes canvas, witness to colorless dreams that appear beneath my grandmother's smile. Standing together under protective, moonless, starless night, blonde and black hair touching, daring the ocean, daring the air between them. My grandparents clasp hands, stare into the invisible lens of an invisible camera. They stare straight ahead into an erect future, cross burnings, slashed tires, backyard clotheslines torched, dead cats hurled through windows. 2. 1953, I am born. Granddaughter, the color of coral, ripened peaches, brown hair that rolls up into little rivers. I entered this world carrying grandmother's birthmark, the same arrow pointing east inside her left thigh. I grow my father's smile when I cry. I grow the gray stone wolf eyes of grandfather. When I am 7, my tears teach me grandfather's language. 3. I grow into the arrow inside my left thigh. I grow hair, breast for the wind's daughter. I grow hips, teeth for the moon's wife. 4. I become the yellow dress, patched, bloodstained, hidden. I become the ground somewhere over the South Carolina border, receiving their dance, their prayer. I become blonde, black hair, bleeding together. I become their hands, loving in and out of season. I become their land, fertilized by miscarried, aborted ashes. I am the life they could not birth, they could not name, nor not call home. 5. My grandmother teaches me other languages: archery, piano, ballet, seduction, rivalry. My mother teaches me to be her, not become the arrow inside my left thigh. She demands that I cease walking, talking with wolves. 6. Grandfather's obituary did not mention my grandmother as his wife, my mother as his daughter, my uncle as his son. The wrinkled, worn news clipping chronicles and keeps the evidence of your memories. The smell of antique leather, expensive cigars, expensive smiles. Collections of leather-bound books, photo albums, bank portfolios. New jazz brews inside of you, like chocolate wrapping licorice sticks. 7. I am the crying wolf, warrior without tribe. My inkwell spills dust-coated ink meant for a hidden canvas, moth-eaten, evicting shadows of another likeness, another moth-eaten revenge. 8. I become sword of the grandfather, become another trophy, memory, Persian rooms, satin afternoons, tea biscuits, polite assassinations, sexual innuendos, piano recitals, lullabies, waltz, and proper chairs. I am the granddaughter, witness to the incest of rain and snow, witness to the betrayal of rainbows. 9, we bury yellow dresses, deeds, birth certificates. We bury swords, teeth, segregated deaths. We bury questions, reprisals, birthrights. 10, every morning, the wolf visits my yard, and I remember to feed him. So it's always exciting to find these poems that just show up, that are hidden inside of other people's stories. But I believe that when we tell our stories, when we read our stories, that we find ourselves over and over again inside of each other's stories. And that for me is why I write. It's the anchor that connects our humanities. I want to move into a section of poetry that speaks to this time of social unrest, this time of white supremacy, this time of once again bearing witness to so much pain and evil. A few years ago, I was approached by a group of writers in New York City who were creating a project called Poetry of Lamentation. And it was a very powerful, interesting invitation, which meant that if you chose to participate, within 24 hours, you would get your person. This project, Poetry of Lamentation, was to offer tribute, to communicate with families across the country that we see you, we stand with you, we hold the space of grief, of loss. It was predictable that within 24 to 48 hours, another person would be murdered at the hands of police in the United States. I said yes, I hung up the telephone, and I remember walking towards another part of the house and nearly falling to my knees, thinking I'm waiting for someone to die. I've been called to write a poem for someone who will die. I was told that a link to that person, my person, would show up in an email, perhaps a link to a TV station, a news bite, a radio bite, or perhaps a newspaper article. But I received a link to an evening, premiering the news that was coming that night, which literally said, unidentified African-American man killed on Route 17. More news tonight on the 6 o'clock news. That was what my person, that is who he was. That's all I was given. Oh, my brother. Oh, my brother, my brother. I will weep for you whenever the sun rises or falls. Your shadow has been betrayed. The red of the bullet bleeds and covers every breath of all the life you've lived. Oh, my brother, I will stand here and wail your name. Hold the bullet inside my mouth that cannot stop convulsing with pain. I will learn to swallow the spasms in your screams. I am calling my brothers and my sisters to the ground beside this river where your blood is born, where your blood runs until it is clear, until its red is spent, and it stands up like the wind and speaks into a light we cannot name. Oh, my brother, I beat my chest, pierce my hands, run back and forth naked in rain, trying to swallow this red of a bullet that knew your name, cracked open your smile, stole your hair. Oh, my brother, I weep for all I do not know about you. I weep with the bullet that is lodged in my throat, whispering its own requiem. The red of the bullet cries out your name. The bullet whispers to me about the flowers that heard the sound. The bullet whispers to me about the sorcery of forgiveness. The bullet whispers to me about black flies staring the ground beneath your feet. Oh, my brother, who will wash your feet, save the sand inside your shoes? Oh, my brother, where is your mother, your father? Who will help me scrape the dried blood that blocks the doorway of your heart? I want to be the water, the sweet oils that rub into the skin of you. I want to hold your bones steady so your mother can identify your face and rub the soft earlobes she's kissed 1,000 times. Oh, my brother, how must we hold your lover who wants a redemption for your skin, who searches for your lips in the dark? Oh, my brother, there is so much blood falling from the sky today, suffocating the light, suffocating the babies. I will guard your roadkill blood. If necessary, I will chew the bullet and digest metallic contradiction. I will be the shovel and the crypt. I will sing your name until the wind lifts it from my tongue and sings your legacy into the 10th degree of sound. I will wail the presence of your history through this throat that is out of rhythm. We be poets, the daughters of your winters and the sons of your summers. We be ancient scribes, the architects of your sweat and your tears. My poems will be forever screaming the life of you. I dare the red of the bullet to forget. I dare the killer of you to remember. My words are the acid erasing the crime scene. My words are the softness of all the evidence of ghost hidden beneath your shirt, inside your underwear. Hungry ghost, casting your name into rivers. Oh, my brother, oh, my brother, what are the ancestors singing today? Oh, my brother, you don't have to behave in your grave. Oh, my brother, call me, and these lyrics will gather arms and stage your rebellion. The red of the bullet has the poetry of your spirit embedded with indelible ink. Oh, my brother, hear the wail of the red of the bullet. Hear the space between your ribs crumble. Hear the sounds in your chest become a roaring ocean. Hear the butterflies cease flying. Hear the silence, this silence that will not be quiet. I just want to sit with this for a second. It's a lot. It is a lot for this country to continue to bury our children. Too many children, too many lives. This next poem is sort of a continuum of this notion of what we dare to speak. I was invited to respond to an exhibit at the National Museum a couple of years ago. And it was an ekphrastic poetry exercise to respond to my choice of an image in this exhibit. And I was drawn into a photograph of an African-American male, beautiful African-American man in Angola prison in Louisiana. And this poem, I feel like he wrote it. He just wrote it staring through me, and I became the vessel for him. No poetry. No poetry for these hands. No poetry for these trees. No poetry for these men. No poetry for the time you chase. No poetry for dreams that hold you hostage. No poetry for the truth brewing inside crooked hallways, crooked courtrooms, crooked jailhouses. No poetry for the fog covering the blood. No poetry for the noose flapping against the wind's tongue. No poetry for the words that make it happen. No poetry for the accused. No poetry for the accuser. No poetry for Confederate matchsticks. No poetry for your wild horses storming foreign shores. No poetry for your God, who is always late to every funeral of every Black child. No poetry for the war guns. No poetry for the hidden ones. No poetry for the nameless corners that claim us over and over again. No poetry for your songs that break apart. No poetry for old stories crawling under locked doors. No poetry for your collection of tongues and burned out moons. No poetry for the make-believe stars in your crown. No poetry, no poetry, no poetry. No poetry for the days in between all the years you remembered. No poetry for the days in between all the years you forgot to loosen the noose. No poetry for Juneteenth midnights when you refused to kiss the neck of newborn freedom. No poetry dripping from beneath your slashed armpits. No poetry to erase from my son's ribs. No poetry for Juneteenth moon nights. No poetry dripping from beneath your slashed armpits. No poetry to erase from the smoke of an M16. No poetry to sew inside my son's pockets. No poetry to bury inside my son's ribs. No poetry to bury inside my son's mouth. No poetry to bury inside my son's ears. No poetry to bury beneath my son's feet. No poetry, no poetry, no poetry to bury inside my son's heart. No poetry, no poetry, no poetry to feed the crows feasting upon his limbs. No poetry for the last breath that cracks into 1,000 moments inside a mother's tear. No poetry for the light inside our children's eyes, trying to find their way home. We are all the poems kissed by the beloved. We are all the poems daring to grow inside empty bowls. We are all the poems lurking in the shadows. We are all the poems that cannot be forced into cages. We are all the poems holding up the sky. We are all the poems that will no longer sacrifice our seeds to a toxic wind. We are all the poems rattling the ghost bones of the Middle Passage. We are all the poems pissing on blood-stained flags. We are all the poems peeping in windows. We are all the poems dressed to kill. We are all the poems that will not be quiet. We are all the poems waiting to sharpen our oyster knives. We are all the poems wrapped up in dangerous hair, waiting to strangle history. We are all the poems that dance and sing us beyond the currency of our skin. We are all the poems becoming dangerous medicine. We are all the poems our ancestors carried from sea to shining sea. We are all the poems unwritten, uncensored, unworthy of your memorials, constitutions, air, water, land. We are all the poems we need to start a revolution. So in this moment of documenting this moment, the role of the writer as historian, as researcher becomes more and more important for offering new ways to imagine ourselves and reimagine a different kind of portal, how we reimagine after COVID-19, how we might show up differently, how we might move differently, how we might step inside of a new way of being without dragging all of our racism, our homophobia and classism and ageism and all the ugliness that our humanity right now is holding. This is a poem that I wrote watching the 11 o'clock news the night that Silent Sam was being toppled on campus. And I've always considered myself this other daughter of the Confederacy. That flag has become somebody's whore. That flag has just become something else. But this Confederacy, this conversation, I'm inside of it too. And I consider myself this other daughter because this land is my land as well. Too many people like me also fought behind that flag. So that night I found myself crying and laughing and crying. And at one point, the tiny little voice said, "Why are we crying?" And this is a poem that wrote itself, watching the 11 o'clock news, watching a wench like me never again, never again, never again to be whipped, never again to be thought about in that time, that framework, hoping that the lessons that when that land broke, when that statue toppled, when that energy was expelled, and the newness of what it means to be human, what it means to respect each other, when that new energy took place, it was a time of crying. Letter from the other daughter of the Confederacy. Would I have been your Black Confederate princess, emblem of truly a new dirty South, a new rag for all the wiping, swiping of blood-dazzled sidewalks, trees bent heavy, heaving beneath black claws, tigers, and bears. Would I have been your Black Confederate concubine, sashaying a room draped in rope, teeth, dried phalanges, pulsating throats, electric shocked eye sockets? Would I have been your Black Confederate dominatrix, razor blades strapped beneath your armpits, whips growing like hair across your ribs, your mother's mother's mother raising out of a hell box to reclaim her name, the last of a savage cave tribe buried alive beneath a Southern mansion crest. Your father's father's father does not wince in his grave. He's known other Black Confederate dominatrix, claimed flagpoles to pleasure her demands, swallowed birth certificates, census reports, Bibles to pleasure his own demands. Would I have been your Black Confederate trophy, hidden inside mahogany carved beds, hidden inside crystal flutes, hidden inside a meadow of thistle, hidden inside the elbow of an oak that knows everything, everyone, or inside an owl's nest, just a throw from the slave auctioneer's voice? Would I have been your Black Confederate lover? Bite me, bite me. While an entire continent roars back upon your back. Our daughters are not your daughters. Our daughters are not your daughters. Our daughters are not your daughters. Let them be. Would I have been your Black Confederate secret? I am the names of smothered babies in the hands of mammies so Black they startled the night they steal from. I am the names of all the daughters grinding and sifting gree-gree into your soup. I am the name of every womb you poisoned. I am the name of all your weariness, all your fear, all your disease, all the death I hold back from you. I am the life of the 100,000 nightmares that hold you hostage to sunlight. Would I have been your Black Confederate truth, once upon a Black Confederate lynching book? I am all the names of all the names of all the names of Black skin becoming stardust, floating Black snow, falling all over the porcelain nakedness of your white Confederate mistress. Confederate Black snow, falling on the tongues of your white Confederate children. Black Confederate skin, tucked inside their pockets for good luck. I am the name of the belt you tighten around your white Confederate waist, woven from my Black Confederate skin. Would I have been your Black Confederate anthem, a princess without a country, the other daughter of the Confederacy, sewing bullets inside Bible pages, wrapping swords with crushed red velvet, dancing knives beneath war skirts? I am this other daughter of your Confederacy, standing bone to bone, to bone, to bone, to all the other Confederate daughters, eating the stars falling from your eyes, eyes that could not bear witness to your other daughter of your Confederacy. I am that daughter, bleached bones, rotating eye sockets, searching upside down for stolen birthrights, shackled starlight, and the indescribable taste for freedom. Thank you for listening. I'm going to end with a poem, a love note for the ancestors. All of my poetry is really seeped inside of memory, what we remember to remember, what we keep always keeps us. Love note to the ancestors. We cannot prevent the birds of sorrow from flying over our heads, but we can refuse to let them build nest in our hair. Who stops to record the whimpering of an ocean? I've seen you wrestling with the frozen tears of a moon. I know how you measure your own heartbeats with the stretching of olive branches. I've heard you scolding the wind for changing her course, her song. I listened to you scrape your crystallized tears from the roof of your mother's grave, from the hem of your sister's shroud, from the womb of a raped daughter. I have watched prayers crawl up your arms and dig into your heart. I become blinded by all the light that lives there, all the light that your hands continue to harvest, all the light and love you offered to each middle passage morning when you decided to live and scatter your seeds. Dear ancestors, thank you for being our mirrors, showing us that we're not the stories that anyone has made of us. We never were. We are energy and matter untethered from those who meant to contain us. We are rearranging the structure of who we be, who we are becoming in the face of any puny narratives thrust upon us. I am grateful to be in the realm of the word, in the realm of language and words, understanding that it is our time to rewrite the narrative and to be an invitation for generations to come, telling our stories, celebrating our stories, and sharing our stories. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nichol. I'm supposed to moderate this or to ask some questions. I'm going to have a hard time doing that. I just want to be honest. I'm speechless at listening to Jackie. I'm immensely fearful of spoiling the mood. I would feel far more comfortable keeping my mouth shut. I am reminded that I'm a mere lawyer, a sort of hack with language. I can do some things. I can give a speech. I can write some things, but to use Jackie's words, it's a different kind of portal and an immensely inferior one. I love the description I saw of Jackie as North Carolina's Billie Holiday. That sounds right to me. And I feel like I'm sharing the stage with Billie Holiday as what would we say, an expert in chopsticks. So I'm sort of embarrassed to be part of the program. If Reverend Barber Stuck, if he were here, I was thinking I could maybe, when I was asked, navigate a space between these two great heroes. But if I'm only listening to Jackie, then I just feel soulless and like a hack. So I hope you'll forgive me. I'm going to play a tiny role in this program. It's no surprise, I should say, that we have a huge crowd. I heard someone say one time that it just goes to show that people will turn out in tremendous numbers to see a fine moderator at work. So my role will be a tiny one. I was thinking about this afternoon too, kind of changing the mood. I don't do moderator gigs anymore. It's been a long, long time. There's a reason for that. I've had a strange career. For a long time when I was a young professor, it was common to get invited to go around the country from various places to the place under the assumption that I might have something important to say. Then I was a dean for a long, long time at two places. And I learned that deans were mainly used to introduce people who would have something important to say. The administrators in this audience will know that. And then I became a university president for a while, and I discovered university presidents were used to introduce the people who would then introduce the people who had something to say. So I've kind of shied away from it since. But when some friends asked if I would come do this tonight, my reaction was, like probably a lot of yours, the notion of listening to my two favorite speakers and writers and inspirations in North Carolina was too much to pass up. So I decided I would come play a role just to make sure that I got a ticket for the proceedings. I want to ask a few questions. I'm going to ask, I think, 2 or 3 questions of Jackie. I hope they're not too displacing. I've been reminded to let you know that you should put questions in the Q&A, and then Daniel is gonna field those questions and present them to Jackie. So I'll start off. Jackie, I was thinking about this. I was imagining that you were probably taken like the rest of the country with your young colleague, Amanda Gorman. I read an interview with her, and she said this: now more than ever, the United States needs an inaugural poem. Poetry is typically the touchstone that we go back to when we have to remind ourselves of the history that we stand on and the future that we stand for. And that reminded me of so much of your work, the past that we stand on, the future that we stand for, sort of suggesting a little bit, the Seamus Heaney line, the longed for tidal wave of justice can rise up and hope and history rhyme, hope and history. But I was thinking more, you read tonight from a birthday tribute to Dr. King, or at least you had scheduled that. But there's a second one, your birthday tribute number 2, that I've been taken with on this on this theme. I'm going to read this in a way that will be humiliating, as you all know, because it's not Jackie, but a couple of lines that I wanted to ask you about. No poets from Selma to Montgomery, but your blood always rhymed. No poets hiding under dingy sheets, but their bullets were fierce alliteration. No poets, Martin, when you climbed the mountain, but when you echoed, we answered back from the valley. As poets in harmony, forceful, as only your poem of life could be. Those notions that you climbed the mountain, but when you echoed, we answered back from the valley, and your poem of life. I'm stunned or shaken or moved intensely by those words. And they remind me of this young poet's charge. Would you talk about that for just a minute, Jackie?
Certainly, and I did not read that poem tonight. So the audience may, maybe I should read it now. So, but you did a wonderful, wonderful reading of some of those lines. So you were reading from
a birthday tribute number 2, which is not one of the ones you gave me, but it's one of the ones I'm so taken with that I mentioned myself.
So happy that you were taking it with it. It's a series of poems that I started writing, I guess, right after King's death almost. I'd gone to all of the MLK programs for his birthday, and I decided that it was a time that I should stay home and really celebrate and honor him in quietude. Just being still and thinking about the poetry of his life. And I wanted to use a lot of metaphors about him as a child. The first 3 lines are, there were no poets there, none, standing beside your crib, no fire throwers, no lights, but your mother knew. She felt the Shango child that she had birthed. Your fetal movements were little echoes of boom, 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 marching, little spears demanding the wind to speak. There were no poets there, Martin, when you arrived. So I wanted this notion of, I'm always thinking about the ordinariness, the everydayness of poetry, where we find poetry, and that his birthing was no different than any other baby's birthing. There were no poets there to herald him into the world. There were no violins, and yet he came. He was his own poem. So I wanted to use as many metaphors, a loud freedom hymnal, and angels gathered in Georgia too, winged you, birthed you, your memories of black faces, fireflies, clay dirt, mountains, your memories. So thinking that through his bloodline, from birth, there was the sonnet of freedom that was booming inside of him. So this fierce alliteration of his life, from Selma to Montgomery, but your blood always rhymed. So I wanted to think about how he was always a constant force, even before he knew he was a constant force. And how when I think about correlating that to the speaker at the inauguration, Ms. Gorman, we continue to look at poetry. I continue to look at, discover, always find poetry inside of the most usual everydayness. Because every day, every breath right now, for a lot of us, is a breath of resistance. Every breath is a declaration of we are here and worthy to be here. Just as Martin, those many years ago, marching through streets with signs that said, I am a man, we're still declaring that we are here. So I think our young sister is right on point in terms of history and herstory and where it carries us. And it's not indivisible. It's not an indivisible movement, but that history is pushing this future. And that future is pushing that history further out into the ocean where it needs to go.
Right. Thank you. There are a lot of reasons you're a great hero to me. One is that you're such a remarkable teacher. A teacher, I know you're a great teacher in the classroom. I hate to say nice things about Duke, but God knows I wish I could sit in your class. But maybe even more fascinating to me is your teaching to the broader world. You teaching to all of the people of North Carolina, of course, all of the country, but people of all kinds of dispositions and ages and backgrounds and education levels. You work to reach them all, and you're hugely successful at that. I'm guessing on this Zoom, there are a lot of academics, there are a lot of professors, a lot of students. A lot of us professor types might be fine in the close confines of the classroom, especially if you give us an hour to get going. But that broader teaching to the wider world is hard, much harder than what we do. And so I wondered if you might talk some about that, first from that side, and then if you wanted, you could ask a second part, because I'm a professor, but having it work the other way. You powerfully bring your inspiration of the outside world into the classroom in the way that others of us can't. So it would be a great favor to me anyway, if you would talk about those two complementary dynamics.
Well, first of all, I guess in my spirit and in my brain and in my intellect and heart, I don't separate the classroom 234, whatever my classroom is at Duke, from a community center in Haywood County. I have the same respect for that person who's newly literate sitting in a writing class with me, and sometimes use the exact same lesson plans. My syllabus at Duke, I used with 8th graders. So I don't make that distinction too often, because for me, it's important as the Poet Laureate of North Carolina to validate for people whose voices have been trudged upon, voices have been silenced, erased, muted, whose stories have sometimes been retold, reimagined through a different lens. It's important for me to help these people get excited about their own stories and understand the worthiness of their voice. When I invite what I consider non-traditional writers to an academic conference or festival, the first thing they say is, I don't belong there. I shouldn't be there. But that is exactly what I have felt in the state of North Carolina for these many years as a writer who intentionally intentionally never wanted an MFA in creative writing. I have a master's in community economic development by choice.
Right.
But I know what those distinctions mean. And I have been very, very intentional about helping people to understand, like, why are you writing this book? Once you know why you're really writing this book, the purpose of it, then you're not limited and siloed into thinking that you're not good enough. And that's what I don't want to say up against, but that's what I'm encountering as I'm running across the state. People who say, wow, I've never shared any of this writing with anyone because no one ever asked.
Mm.
So I'm in that position to showcase these writers who don't have MFAs, some who don't have high school degrees, but whose stories are powerful, whose stories are needed, whose stories should be, a part of this tapestry of the literary arts across the state of North Carolina. Just like we tap into, folk life art, I'm reaching some of the same audiences of writers, who don't have a place. And it's all about place and location and hierarchy and gatekeepers and who has permission and who does not have permission. So, the literary community is a wonderful state of being in North Carolina. And yet I am 67 years old. And I think about our first Native American poet laureate, who in my opinion should have been the reader at this most recent inauguration. It would have been wonderful to have her presence there, her voice. I am happy that our youth, I'm always saying, where are the children, where are the youth? But I think it would have been very powerful to have had Amanda Gorman open for her in that moment and have the honor of standing beside an incredibly powerful voice. So I think we have to be careful in this culture of commerce. We are a culture of commerce. We have to be very, very careful what my biggest fear for Amanda Gorman is she's become so commercialized. I just want to call her up and go, are you okay? This is bigger than, this has become something else. I'm not sure people will remember her words that day. They're going to remember, oh, and she got a model contract and, and yada, yada, yada. And there's a Barbie doll made from her. All power to the sister for getting paid, because I'm all for it. But I just look at the strategic kind of implementation of leaving out our only. It's taken her 60 some years to be in that place as the first Native American poet laureate. So that's why I'm talking about hierarchy. And so I guess I don't make a distinction. That's the bottom line, is I don't make too much of distinction with my audiences. I teach them the same thing. I teach them the exact same things. If that makes sense.
Let me ask you one more question and I'll turn it over to Daniel. And this is a sort of grotesque question, but I know you are one of North Carolina's most powerful and successful activists and agitators. I want to ask you just a word about the state. And I'm going to do it in a way that's really out of place, sort of sounding like a politician.
Okay.
I read a story a couple weeks after the 2020 election, and it had this paragraph about North Carolina. A remarkable 81% of North Carolina Republican voters turned out in North Carolina on November, according to Michael Bitzer at Catawba. That compares to 75% among Democrats and 69% of unaffiliated voters, much higher. And of the 365,000 who cast ballots in 2020, but not 2016, so new voters, the single biggest group were 90,000 white Republicans. Now, the story sort of concluded Trump is able to speak to and motivate a core group of North Carolina voters who were completely loyal to him. I spend all the energy I have in North Carolina, working on North Carolina. You have done it far more effectively, far longer, and far better. But that statement to me, that set of facts is astonishing. After 4 years, all the horror that we know about this president, an even stronger participation from Republicans than Democrats, and even among new voters. The activist in you, how do you keep a sense of optimism and hope even in these often dark times?
I'm hopeful and I stay balanced, and I saw that Sister Trudy Harris had a question that makes me think about how to answer this.
Mhm.
That's not my business.
Yeah.
My business is reminding myself who I am. My business is remembering the land that so many of us have tilled, have kept alive, keep fertile in the state. My business is to ensure Black and brown children, like someone asked me recently, are you ever gonna like not wear your hair like that? I said, I will change my hairstyle when little Black girls can go to school and someone not send them home because they don't like what their hair look like. So, you know, everything that Black people do is a political statement. My business is not being apologetic about being who I am on my terms. You know, my business is to, not just for Black children, but I have a lot of conversations with I have beautiful little young blonde children who I love dearly as my children, because that's my business, that they know a Black person intimately. And this is all about relationships. Those same people, well, no, I take that back. A lot of those people that we're talking about are alive because some Black people kept them alive. There was a Black housekeeper. There was someone who fed them, who clothed them, who cooked for them. There was a man who drove for Daddy till he died. But, you know, they never saw us. You know, even when they say, oh, well, you know, Miss Bertha was like family. We invited her to all the children's weddings and we went to her funeral and my daddy cried just like he was one of her children. And somehow that thread still is managed to be eaten, like a spider would eat its own. So I'm looking at all of this, and my energy has to be in a fruitful place. It has to be in a place where people are doing the good work. It's not so much, I don't believe that my resistance is not working against that, but what am I creating in lieu of that? And to me, that's where the power is. I am not shocked. I am not surprised when I hear those statements. I'm traveling across the state of North Carolina. There are counties that I'm like, okay, we need to like not be coming through this county after dark. Like we need to be on the other side of this county. I know where I am in North Carolina. I know that there are places that are still sundown communities. It's not talked about, it's not written, but people know, and they're the unwritten Southern codes that we all know amongst ourselves. So being a Southerner and knowing all of that, I am very, 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 very intentional about where I put my energy. And it has to be doing this work, teaching. You know, I've worked with all white male preppies. And someone was like, why on earth would you have accepted that residency? And I said, because they need to know me. And what I said to them was like, we're going to rock and roll for 2 weeks. And at the end of my residency, see, down the road, six years from now, when you are at the legislature, when you are the director of some policy making entity, if you don't know the face of anybody Black, you know mine. Because see, by then I'm going to be in my 80s or my 90s. It's about relationship building. And it's about truth telling, and truth telling, as we know, is very, very dangerous. I am so proud of the youth of this country who have voice, who are using that voice, who understand how to use and brand a whole movement, a movement. We've moved things because of the young people right now. But as an elder, I'm not concerned with those guys. I live around them. I'm out here in the sticks. I'm out here in the country. You know, I live around them. They're in and out of my house doing work, the good old boys. But something that was very telling to me this summer when we remodeled a bathroom, the contractor said to me, you know, we really like you, my guys, and we really like you and your husband, your family, you're really good people. And I'm talking serious good old boys. He said, but I'm gonna tell you something, because I really like you. He said, the next time I see you, I want you to tell me you bought a gun. He said, I know that goes against everything you believe in and all of your values. He said, but Miss Shelton Green, he said, it's time to get a gun. He said, this is your good old redneck buddy talking to you. He said, because boys like me have gone crazy. And he said, it's coming. Now, yeah. What do you do with that? What do you do with that? So it's real, you know, for me, it's real. I know those statistics exist. It's, you know, the numbers are a little daunting, but I live it every day. And I think for those of us who live it every day, we're not shocked. Those numbers are not intimidating. I wish Dr. Barber were here because his campaign, you know, is pushing this agenda. His campaign is the voice for so many of us. But I speak
let me bring Daniel in to turn the questions over to a lot of folks who are anxious to ask. Thank you very much. Daniel?
Hey, Gene, thanks so much. That was great. It's great to come in at the tail end of this program where all the smart, beautiful things have already been said, and I can just come back with my little push broom and get some of the dust at the end. That was lovely. Thank you so much for the questions, Gene. I did want to ask you though, Jaki, share with you, and I think you can see some of them, but I'm going to pick one out, a question from one of the folks here, which I actually have an interest in as well. So that's the reason I'm picking it. As an activist, can you share any inspirational good trouble you've instigated or been a collective part of despite the outcome? And I know you have.
Oh, wow. Well, how far you want to go back? So we can start with my high school years. I grew up in a family that definitely was very conscientious about civil rights, and My family, was at the forefront of the civil rights movement. So many families in Orange County. I attended integrated schools under the Freedom of Choice plan. I was kicked out of Orange High School sophomore year. Landed in a Quaker boarding school in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And I was kicked out because a group of us organized a walkout at the age of 15. A walkout demanding that one, we be treated as human beings. Two, more inclusion of African-American students in the student body activities and organizations, and hiring of an African-American history teacher and more Black faculty. So being a child living here in the 50s and 60s and knowing what pickup trucks with Confederate flags and gun racks on the back meant, there was a lot of fear, and I understand the fear. As I've gotten older, I remember doing something really, really stupid. One summer I attended summer school at UNC and was running around with a bunch of integrated bunch of kids, and this white kid talked me into going with him to a Klan rally in Chatham County. And I think back to how we both could have been murdered, how, stupid. But I've always needed to bear witness. I've always needed to see the other side, especially since I live in the middle of it. And I also know growing up, I've always, a lot of Black people say, well, we've always known white people better than they know themselves because we've always been present in their lives. And as James Baldwin said, you never had to see me. You never had to see me. So my good trouble started, as a child. Mm-hmm. And I remember being glued to the television, reading about, people down in Scotland, that young kids, Black kids putting chickens in the middle of the road, to block the police as they were marching. And paralleling that to civil rights movements across the world for children, looking at South Africa, where young people were at the forefront. Mm-hmm. So that's, I can truly say that it started in my youth. One of the first poems I remember writing around the 5th or 6th grade was based on a true story. And the poem is entitled Happiness. And the poem was, purple Converse PF flyers, period. 10 packs of Mary Janes, period. Fountain pen ink, period. Yada, 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 period. And the last line was, saw a white man run from a Black boy today. And I remember I wrote it in the 6th grade. It was, this man was taunting this Black boy. And the kid just started chasing the man and he just fled. And I thought, yes, to see this white grown man running from this child. But yeah, it's in my blood. I come from a line of people who believe in who they are. And I've always been told you can be whoever you want to be. You are worthy. As a child, I was not allowed to go into the places in Mebane that had colored only on the door, or an arrow that pointed to the side door for a hot dog. I remember my mother said, I better not ever catch you going in anybody's back door or down an alley to a side screen door to buy food. You have food. There's nothing you need there. So it's who we are and how we continue to teach our young people to to just know who you are and to respect yourself and to know your worth. And I talk to so many young African-American students in academia who are suffering, who talk about the racism on their college campuses amongst their faculty. Young women who come and cry on my couch, I'm done. I'm dropping out. I'm like, no, you cannot stop working on your doctorate. You have to keep going. So I do this work because it has to be done. But it's more than just a teaching. It's how we're holding these young people who are tired.
Mhm.
They're tired, they're exhausted, they're afraid. And we have to be these safe places for them. Where are their safe places? Where do they go off campus? Who is there for them? So that's been very important to me as an elder. Just I can't do nothing about being an elder, but be one. I may as well step into this and be the best elder, the kind of elder, be like the elders who took care of me,
Mhm.
who showed me the way, who held me, who told me, you can do this, you can't give up, you are all that.
I have a question here from one of my compatriots, Miriam Ginger. I love that you see lives as poems. What can you say to young aspiring poets, Black, brown, white, that might advise them about how to recognize the poetry they themselves may be living?
I think first of all is to turn off their gadgets, to step outside into the natural world. I think all of us, not just our students, but we are so engaged. We have left the natural world. We've like totally left it, some of us, on so many levels. And I think our students especially are so, they've got to do that paper, they've got to do that work. And for my students, sometimes it's like, I just need you to go for a walk today. And I need you to just listen. We've forgotten how to listen. So for me, it's asking them to tune into who they are. What are you keeping? Sometimes I say, like, look inside of your family. What are the stories inside of the family? What are some artifacts that are inside of the family that you keep, that instruct who you are? And I could name a few in my family that have guided me. I'm talking material artifacts, things that have been passed down. One of the lines in the poem I just read, the last poem, Confederate Daughter, was the Black Confederate belt made from my Black Confederate skin was taken. I lifted that as a found story from a student of mine who, in class one day, we were having a conversation about what we keeps us, and they were writing in the voice of an artifact, that having the artifact talk about them. The student said, I have another question I'd like to ask you. What do we do with things that we don't want to keep? And I said, okay, tell me more. And he said, well, I have this thing. I was like, tell me more. It's at home. What is it? He said, my family has a pocketbook, a purse that is made from human flesh. And he said, I am next in line as the male in line to receive this artifact. And he said, I don't want it. What do I do? I said, you don't take it. And he said, but you don't understand. My family will disown me. So for the next class period, the entire class was in, and he was so distressed and emotional. And I said, well, bring it to Durham and we will offer it a proper burial. I said, bring it to Durham and we will memorialize it and let it be at peace. And he said, I can't do that. I said, well, you're in med school. You're going to make more money than your daddy made anyway. Just like, the hell with them. And he's like, nope, you don't understand. We never did, of course, reach any. But that's that line. So I'm telling this because a lot of young students will say, I don't know what to write about. And I am responsible for giving them those prompts that take them inward.
Mhm.
Prompts to just asking them, where do you live? Where do you live? Write about your street. Write about the first kitchen that you can remember. And just these simple writing exercises open up this world of story, because it's never about the kitchen. It's about everything that happened in the kitchen. Whose kitchen? Where was that kitchen? I found out my parents were getting a divorce at the kitchen table when I was 12. You know,
Yeah.
these stories that the kitchen's holding. That necklace that you have from your great grandmother. It's not just about the necklace, it's about your grandmother. It's about her story. It's about the necklace at the bottom of a feed sack coming through Ellis Island. That necklace that continues its own legacy. So I would tell them to start with themselves.
Yeah.
Start with themselves, to write about what they know, to write about what's dear, and to write about what they can hear. Not what they're looking for, but what are you listening to? What can you hear? What can you feel? Write about that. What can you taste? Write about that.
What's especially interesting to me about your poetry is it exists in two, I mean, at least two worlds. One is on the page, and one is the life that you give it as you read it, as you perform it, as you feel it. And I'm interested in, and one of our one of the people here asked about this. What's the role of performance in your poetry? How do you create and inhabit different speaker voices so freely?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Sometimes I can't answer that question. Like the slave, you know, like the slaveholder's voice. Sometimes the voices just come through. The language tells me what it requires. The Confederate daughter piece, you know, that whole thing about, you know, Confederate lover, bite me, bite me, bite me. When I was writing it, I just thought it was hysterical that I was actually talking about being somebody's Confederate lover. And I wanted that hysteria kind of inside of that. So language directs me. I really pay attention to going inside of the texture of words and how words become little houses. And they have their own personalities as little houses. And they just tell me who I'm supposed to be inside of them. And I have a different breath for every poem, but it's sort of natural. I've been writing for a long time, for a very long time, and it's taken me, for a long time, I could not hear my voice. For many years, I did not know what my voice really sounded like. I knew what the poem sounded like, but it's probably perhaps been in the past 30 years that I have actually been able to hear my voice, to compassionately listen and hear my voice, and to play with it. You know, the other part of that is growing up around a lot of traditional readers and going to poetry readings and reading and listening to amazing poetry that was read horribly. Not to say that I think that I am a fabulous reader, but I just wanted to breathe life. If, you know, there's some words that just require, you know, the words that are dressed up, you should honor them. The words that look like that you're taking them out on a date, take them out on a date through your breath, through your lungs. And there was a time, there were some poems that would require, I'd have to stand in the mirror and I'd have to listen to myself. I needed to see myself reading it and know what that felt like, but also what it looked like coming across. The Oh My Brother poem is a very difficult poem for me to read. It's very difficult. Tonight I got through it, but often I become very emotional. I don't think of myself as a performer. I really don't. I consider myself a reader. And what comes through is what's coming through my spirit.
I'm going to ask just one more question, bring us up to the moment. You are the North Carolina Poet Laureate, and to me, you seem to be the perfect person for that position, the way you care about people, the way you care about poetry, the way you care about the state. And I know that it's made a lot of changes for a lot of individuals that you've been able to touch all around the state. And I'm wondering how this position has changed you and your work.
Wow. How has the position changed me? I am truly honored and humbled to be the first African-American and the third woman Poet Laureate of North Carolina. And I'll be very, very honest with you. In my brain, in my mind, it is not anything I've ever wished for. It's not why I do the work. I will always write. If I never publish another book, I'm always going to be a writer. It is not the publishing. It is not this public presence. I appreciate it. I'm humbled, but that is not why I do the work. Writing is my yoga. And I want young children to be as excited about writing as I was when I was a child. You know, I want to talk to those little girls who talk to me about their diaries. And I was like, yeah, I remember 6th grade, like, what was your boyfriend's name? You know, and to share those early stories about when I first started writing, it was in my diary. So here I am, the Poet Laureate of North Carolina. And, you know, it's a political statement, whether I want to believe it or not. It's a political statement. As I travel across the state of North Carolina, there are factions of North Carolinians who have a need to remind me, you may be all that, but you're just another Black woman that we don't give two flying for. And I experience all of that. So the book that I should be writing is Poet Laureating While Black. That's the book. That is the book. And having said all of that, it is very humbling to me to walk into rooms where there are many, many people of color. It is very rewarding to walk into a room where there are Black women in a corner and some of them are crying. And they're saying to me, it's Wednesday night and it's a school night, but we had to bring our daughters here because you are history. You are history. So I had something to happen. I'll tell you the story because I know we're winding down. And it's a story maybe we should end on. So Biscuitville, good old Biscuitville, makers of biscuits, called me last year. Well, they sent me an email. Jaki Shelton Green, congratulations on being the first African-American Poet Laureate of North Carolina, third woman. We here at Biscuitville would like to honor you by putting you on our annual Black History Month bookmark. And it's actually a sausage biscuit coupon, but it's a bookmark. So it was really funny. The woman said, yeah, we always do a Black History bookmark. And usually they're dead old Black people. So the marketing director had this great sense of humor. She's like, usually they're dead old Black people, but you're very much alive. And we would like to put you, and we're going to put Nina Simone on the flip side. I'm like, I'm down. So they were like, okay. 2 weeks later, they call me. Hey, Ms. Shelton Green, we were wondering, would you consider doing a poetry reading at Biscuitville, at one of our Biscuitvilles? And I'm thinking, Biscuitville poetry reading, huh? And I said, what time? And she's like, 9 o'clock in the morning. And I'm thinking, Monday morning, Biscuitville, 9 a.m. poetry reading. This is like not working for me. But I was like, oh, sure, of course. We drive to Greensboro to the location. We cannot get into the parking lot. It is like hundreds of cars everywhere, people looking for spaces. There are big camera trucks, you know, from all over the triad. And I'm thinking, surely they're not here for me. And I go in, the entire Biscuitville staff, like about 18 people, are standing. It's like a wedding procession, like a receiving line. And all of these, mainly African-American, people of color, very diverse staff. Some of them are crying. And they're just, it's like this moment. And the place is packed with people. Lovely, 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 lovely reception. I get a phone call. Hey, Miss Shelton Green, that went really, really well. Can we do this again next Monday? And I'm like, okay. So we go back. It's the same thing, more people. So this particular time, they decide to invite the poet laureate of A&T State University, which I thought was fabulous. And she and I did a poetry reading together. As she's reading, just before I'm to read, these 4 guys come in with Make America Great hats on. They go up, they buy their food, they find a seat, they sit down. And I'm just kind of watching them. And the guy pulls out the bookmark, and he looks at the bookmark, and he looks at me, and he looks at the bookmark, and he looks back at me. And then he talks to all his guys. They're all looking at the bookmark. So fast forward, it is time. The program is over. Everybody's leaving. I'm standing by the door saying goodbye to people. And the 4 guys approach me. First guy, is this you? And I went, yep. And he was like, wow, that's really cool. Second guy says, I just love it when good stuff happens to ordinary people. I said, yeah, me too. So he says, where are you from? And I'm thinking, I am not going to tell you where I'm from. And I say, this is what I said. I said, I'm just a little old country girl. And the first guy says, like us. I said, yeah, like us. And I'm emphasizing, yeah, like us. So this guy who has not spoken pulls out a stack. I mean, like really a big stack of the bookmarks. And he said, yeah, I asked the manager to give me a whole ton of them. I'm taking these to my youngin's Black History Month next week. And I'm standing here going, what is wrong with this scenario? And they are like giddy talking about me. The first guy's like, my wife is going to be so jealous. Like, she's not going to believe that we met the poet laureate of North Carolina at Biscuitville. So the funny guy with the bookmark says, well, nobody's going to believe her unless she takes a selfie with us. And I'm thinking, a selfie. And I just said, okay. Then they were fussing over who was going to stand next to me. In unison, I mean, it's like there was this unspoken code between them. They took off their caps and they threw them behind them onto the chair. We take this picture and they're like, you made our moment. This was so cool to get to meet you. And the first guy said, you keep making us proud. I said, I'm going to do that. I said, I'm going to keep making us proud. Well, the students there, the younger people were like flabbergasted, like, why would you talk to them? Ms. Shelton Green, what were you thinking? And I said, if you witnessed this entire scenario, I did not approach them. They approached me. I am not responsible for their hats. That's not my business. Their hats is not my business. What is my business is my response to people. They were genuine. I said, I've been around the block. I know when people are playing with me, fooling around. This was a genuine exercise, just in human decency. And I reminded them, I said, in that moment, I said, I didn't know what I was going to say, but I had to remind myself, I am the poet laureate of North Carolina. I am everybody's poet laureate, whether they want me or not, whether I want to take a picture with them or not. because I thought, where the hell is this picture going to go? But I did it. I did it. And I did it because there was nothing, you know what I mean? It's like, I didn't see the hats. It was like me running into you, Daniel. And it was just genuine, hey, this is cool. Not pulling my leg, not making fun of it, but just, it was just an encounter. So in that moment, I said, do you think I'm stupid enough that they're going to throw their hats away? The hats are not my business. My response is my business. And that's why, you know, I want to get to that question about how do I write all of the heavy writing and not be depressed and not have it fall on top of me, because it's about bearing witness. And it's not always my story. So I can be the researcher, the historian, the documentarian, the poet who reframes the news. Because someone has to tell it so we feel it. Someone has to tell it so we remember it. And that's what I do, if that answers anything.
It does, Jackie. You know, every day I realize different things that I miss during these COVID times. And right this moment, I'm missing applause, because now we just have to imagine all the applause that you're getting and deserving from the all of us here at UNC. Thank you so much for being this program for us. I want to thank Jean. I want to thank all of you for coming. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes, including Corbin and Emily and Grant and Will and Tina, and especially Liz Gualtieri Reed, who juggles a dozen eggs at a time without breaking a single one. Always grateful for her, never more than I am now. Recording of tonight's webinar will be on the ECL website where you registered or where you linked from on Facebook. Recordings should be posted within 48 hours. Consider supporting this program and other programs in the Department of English and Comparative Literature. Thank you again to everybody. Stay safe, be well, and good night.
Good night. Thank you.